Alright guys, here's kind of the introduction to my project M925A1 build. Wanted to, of course the wind won't die down for 2 hours over here, so we're just gonna have to fight through that. But wanted to hurry up and get a video going on this series before I get too much further into it, because I'm already quite a ways deep into it. So I bought this truck, saved it from going to scrap because that's where it was headed. So it was in pretty rough shape. This is a USMC truck. That means it was used to be unloaded offshore out of a boat. So both rear axles have Detroit lockers in them, and then it's actually got a water fording kit. So what that's supposed to do is send pressurized air to like the power steering pump, I believe the engine crankcase, transmission, transfer case, and just keep water from entering in through the seals by keeping positive pressure in all those pieces, so you're not having to change out your fluids every time you go through a deep water crossing. Because the fluids on this are expensive. It takes 40 quarts of coolant. Basically takes 7 gallons of engine oil. So the things that I've already done, try to get through that. And this hood insulation that's, 40 years old, that's all ripping off on all these trucks by now because it's all dried out, and I'm sure that's going to make a lot of noise. But I put new hoses on for this is the transmission cooler. So this sends coolant through this heat exchanger, and then it sends the transmission oil through. I had to put these 4 new hoses on because they were old and leaking. You could probably see in the intro that the harmonic balancer shot. So this crank pulley, it's 2 discs, and then there's a piece of rubber in between the 2, and that rubber's worn out, so I'm gonna have to replace that. I already replaced the motor for the fan, for the heater, so that works really good now. I'm gonna put a turbocharger setup on it. So I went ahead and bought this parts engine because it's got the manifolds, it's got the turbo and the oil feed and drain, and basically just rob off what I can for parts, and then I'll haul this into scrap because I only paid scrap price for it when scrap was cheap, so I should break even on it. Boy, I tell you what, I came out here when the wind finally died down, and as soon as I turned the camera on, it just started howling again. All right, so this is, like I said, a USMC truck. So this had a special bed. It was a foot longer at 15 feet versus the regular cargo trucks, and the sides would stow underneath the bed through the back, and then up front there, that's actually made for the tailgate. My tailgate's all bent, so it's laying up on top of the flatbed, but you're actually supposed to put the tailgate in right here, and then you can use your truck like an actual flatbed, which the regular cargo trucks didn't let you do. This is a 855 14-liter naturally aspirated Cummins, soon to be turbocharged. But these things were torque monsters from the factory. You got gobs of torque right at idle at 600 RPM. And then they came out with the 8 3-liters. We've got one of those too. That's got more horsepower up top at higher RPM. Better for highway cruising, but this thing is definitely the stump puller. So I definitely wanted a truck with a winch. This has a hydraulic powered 10-ton winch, and everything's working on it with a little lube and persuasion. I'm actually going to put some new cables on to control it with. And then building off of that, since it's got the PTO hydraulic pump, I'm going to convert the bed to a dump bed and do like a power beyond valve. So I won't be able to dump and use the winch at the same time, but I don't know why I would ever need to do that. For now, I put this cheap Dynomax muffler on just to make it bearable to drive around. I went ahead and replaced this hinge. Got this hinge off McMaster car. They call it piano hinge. So it works really well now because it was all seized up before. That's where I store my fire hose and my jumper cables and everything. Building this essentially to be a jack of all trades kind of truck. Number one, I want to have something I can get anywhere when we're shredding trees, so that if there's a fire accidentally, or if we're burning the piles afterwards, I can get to this to control those brush fires. Next, I want to be able to pull a big trailer and haul the excavator around with it. And of course we've got more traffic than I can count, so I'll have to stop every time a car goes by. I want to replace this 5-ton rear-wheel drive single axle dump truck, because then I'll have 6-wheel drive with front-wheel drive and should be able to haul about 10 yards. And eventually I want to replace this flatbed truck, because I'll use this when I go to pick up big loads of parts if I got multiple pallets or whatever. And I really don't need 2 flatbed trucks, but as long as I have the skid steer to pull, I'll probably keep this for the tree shredding business. I built a battery relocation bracket kit for these. So it bolts in using the factory hardware for the toolbox, but then it lets you put in 2 Group 31 batteries. And there's already the knockouts in this box. From what I've been told, this was the factory location for the batteries. Eventually they got moved up into the cab, which is a terrible, terrible decision because all that off-gassing ends up going into the cab. So moving on to the cab, you can see what the design did for this thing. They rust out just because of the way they're built, because they sandwich steel on top of steel, and there's no way to ever dry it out. So I've already gone through, replaced like the rocker panels here. I'm just waiting to paint this until basically the whole cab's ready to be repainted. And I've already gone through, I did the bare paint job, turned out really well. Basically just did the front of the cab, the frame rails on the outside. I'm waiting to do the axles and the inner frame rails once I get the bed pulled off. And I've got a ton of LED lights from my LED light review video that are going to go on this. Got LED headlights for it. I've got a couple different air filters. I plan on making an upgraded air filter kit for these because I've already proven that they are restrictive depending on which engine you have and at what power level it's at. I've got some big upgrades for the cab planned. I've got electric windshield wiper motors. I'm going to be cutting out and replacing all the damaged pieces of the floor. I'm going to retrofit the later style dipstick for the transmission that you access from under the hood instead of through this flap in the floor, because everything known to man can come up through that floor. And same thing with this big hole in the back of the cab, because that hole's where the battery gas was supposed to exit. So that's what the dipstick looks like. Ton of heat and sound come up through there. So I've got an 1/8" plate of steel that I'm going to have laser cut and welded in, and then I'm going to do a layer of paint and lizard skin, and then the factory floor mat. I'm just going to make it removable. I'm not going to bolt it down underneath the seats and everything, because that's what caused this whole floor to rust out to begin with, because it traps water. And I've got all new gauges for it. I'm going to do the dual fuel line mod to it so we get more fuel to the back end of the motor. And then I've got a leather air ride seat, which I've got a video for that. I've got a Corbu passenger seat, bench seat, a lot more comfortable than the factory seat. So this was the factory driver's seat. Just had a little spring. And then this was the passenger seat. And I don't even want to touch it and open it because it's full of old battery parts and it makes me sick every time I inhale it. So that's why I think if you get one of these trucks, this crap needs to go straight into the trash. I've got ladders designed so I can start making aftermarket replacement ladders, since these are getting so hard and expensive to find. I've been piling up parts for this for about a year now, so finally just starting to assemble all of it. Got new ducting for the heater for the cab, gauges, all new hardware, window rebuilds, seals for the doors. One problematic part on these is this part of the fuel strainer on the fuel tank is it's zinc plated. It's like a yellow zinc from the factory, and I had this pulled off and nickel plated, which should outlast the rest of the truck now, because nickel plating is safe for all blends of diesel and biodiesel. But otherwise, these are notorious for rusting and dropping a bunch of rust into your tank. Don't forget to check out my description for the link for the parts that I currently offer. I've got these weld-on and bolt-on dog bone retainers. I need to get those put on once I pull the bed off to do the bed swap is when I'll weld those on. And then from the turbo back, we're going to do a 5-inch exhaust. It's going to basically come out just a continuation of this, coming straight all the way to the back, and then it'll shoot out at a 45 tilted down. So you shouldn't hear it, but the people you're passing will. It'll definitely wake them up. So a year ago, back in February of 22, I made a 14-hour drive one way down to Texas to get a replacement bed. So I'll get this hoisted up, cleaned off, and repainted, and then I'll get the parts welded onto the bottom side of it so we can convert it to a dump bed. Once I'm done, I hope to have a truck as good looking as this, even better. That's comfortable and quiet enough to drive that you can have a conversation with yourself in the cab. I can drive it day or night, drive as many miles as I want without failure of it breaking down. So I hope you'll subscribe to watch the progress of this build, and we'll see you soon for our first video, which will be how to re-dye and recolor a leather seat.